I'm even more convinced that wheat will be the first thing rationed across the planet. And for sure, we are going to go to rationing. I just can't see how we cannot. The way it looks like it's so planned right now to cause the most chaos and breakdown of everything in a single excuse. I'm going to make a bold call here and say what we're about to experience is the largest change in the last 2,000 years.
Wow.
Going back to Roman era collapse period right now.
Check this out. Studies show our appearance directly affects our mental health. Many anti-aging supplements found on store shelves try to capitalize on that. Most of them fall short. This is because they fail at targeting the root of the problem. These products typically try to hide wrinkles, but it's only temporary. The alternative is a solution that goes underneath the surface of the skin to promote the skin's elasticity and overall appearance. It goes by the name of Health with Adapt 2030. This supercharged collagen intake is the secret behind why it works so well. It gets to the source of the problem that causes wrinkles. Collagen is the #1 protein in our skin and what's needed to promote elasticity and a youthful-looking appearance. And if you've been looking for a way to look and feel your best, you'll love Health with Adapt2030.com. Take 51% off for the next 24 hours. Health with Adapt2030.com. Or click on the link in the description box below. And now on with the video.
Special guest exclusive podcast right here on the TradCatKnight.org website, folks. Today is March the 4th, 2022. I hope you all are having a very wonderful and blessed day. As always, we continue to keep the programming moving along here at TradCatKnight, your #1 Catholic podcast and information service. Podcast dumpster diving into all the latest modern madness. So get on over to Adapt 2030. And he's going to help you understand what's really happening in the world. And he's going to help you get prepared for the massive changes coming here in the United States and really all over the place, for that matter, virtually everywhere. So I hope you're ready to go, man. Lay it all on us. How quickly food will become unaffordable. I don't know where you want to start. You want to start Russia, Ukraine, the economics behind that. You tell me where you want to start.
Oh, the mechanism driving it all. You have to go to the base layers. When you look at sickness, the body's showing the outward signs, but then what's causing something out of balance in the body to, cause that imbalance that then manifests as what we call quote unquote sickness. It's the same thing. The sickness that we're seeing is this Russia, supply chain breakdown, hyperinflation, commodity super spike, all these things. That's the sickness. That's the cold, the flu that we're seeing. But what's really causing that dis-ease inside the body and throwing the balance out of kilter electrically, electromagnetically, spiritually? If we step back about 6 months, there was going to be a fertilizer shortage this year for planting and grow season in the Northern Hemisphere, enough that it would reduce global agriculture around 12%. That was anyway, in addition to what we've all just seen. By May, this would be the #1 talking point. Mothers would have figured out they wouldn't have enough money or milk or food for their babies, and it would just be a panic buy situation and full chaos, supermarkets stripped every time they were refilled scenario. Because when you go and you explain that, well, there wasn't enough fertilizer or herbicides, so then the targeted plant would be corn, would be the most heavily affected because they have the most nitrogen uptake and the most weed mitigation between the rows, because grasses tend to grow in between the corn rows. So you need glyphosate and some really heavy hitting herbicides to take care of those plants that would compete with the same nutrient uptake. So grasses are mainly a corn row phenomenon. And then with weakened plants, obviously you're going to get more pests. So there's a pesticide shortage. So we were starting to get levels taken down anyway on global agriculture. And if you do stay about 6 months in the past, when most of these countries that we're seeing in the news now were giving their agricultural forecasts, Russia itself was in the beginning of their rosy forecast at 129 million tons, or maybe 127 on the low end. But then they downgraded that. And you and I we talked about that, Eric. On one of our talks, we spoke specifically about Russia downgrading their wheat forecast and total grains from 129, 127 million down to 120 or 119 million tons. So that was a significant decline already before we even came into the fertilizer shortages. And this was all, let's say, baked into the cake. I mean, this would have been water cooler talk that would have shaped the markets anyway, just on this principle alone. And then I was thinking, they were using all these fertilizer shortages to mask the grand solar minimum crop losses, which were anticipated to intensify this year to the point where most people would see it. And it would definitely shake markets and faith in fiat currencies, knowing that from this year forward, we couldn't grow enough food. That was before the Russia and before the Ukraine thing started. So put
right,
perspective
right.
in it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All before that. Now you see where I'm going to try to frame the program.
Yeah, so let's continue on, buddy. Keep on it, man. I mean, I know exactly the path you're going down, but just lay it all on us.
Okay, so leave that as subset A of information flow. The herbicide and fertilizer shortages, we're going to knock at a bare minimum, 12% of global agriculture offline anyway. So now we fast forward into Russia and Ukraine, which supplies, by the way, 30% of all exportable grains to other countries. Africa being one of the main buyers from Ukraine, and get this, 70% of all grain imports into the EU come from the Ukraine and Russia. So I look at this with the sanctions being thrown around so easily. Gasoline prices have doubled in Germany already. Yet the food prices are going to go triple, quadruple, 4x as we come into this season, because the sanctions put on by the EU is actually cutting off their own food and oil supplies. Because the video I did prior to that, which you just referenced, is how quickly food's going to get expensive, is the one prior was about oil and the oil exports coming out of Russia. Because each of those videos was 15 minutes, and I'm going to put them together for a 30-minute longer kind of content. The oil and the food. Because if you look at the oil, 7.5% of all exported oil across the entire planet comes from Russia. Mm-hmm. So what we look at today from last week is we just racked and knocked off 7.5 to maybe a little more percentage of global oil just stopped on a dime. Now, there was not enough extra capacity anyway with all the pipeline shutdowns and green agenda deals and whatnot. They were barely scraping by it even as it was. So to take 7.5 to 10% off the global market is going to be catastrophic for fuel prices. And then when we look at the things involved in fertilizer, and you're just watching these run-ups that are unbelievable. If you're looking at the commodities prices, you can't have limit stop on 10 commodities in a single day because they rose so much, all in tandem, all in conjunction. So for me, it looks more like a planned chaotic collapse of the full money system around the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to see this, and Moldova has forbidden any exports of wheat and corn out of their country now. And Argentina was already forbidding exports anyway. Paraguay has lost 60% of its soybean crop. And Brazil just downgraded its soybean crop by a minimum of 5% for the year.
Mm-hmm.
All happening in this 1 week. Frame this in reference here. This is biblical, and that's no exaggeration or understatement. This is truly prophetic things happening in the matter of a week. Our world has gone from semi-stable because of COVID into completely unstable and about to reset every system that you know right now.
Right. Yeah. I'll add a few more headlines in here, David, and I'll bring up another point and let you run with it. In regards to oil gas wars, I covered this on the premium podcast here an hour ago. I saw an article on Zero Hedge. Europe does not have enough oil and gas now to make it through next winter. So what I think is happening here in conjunction with the big picture, right, because you've got sort of the Zionist countries on the left, all together forming for World War III, United States, Great Britain, France, Israel, which is huge because Israel's now saying they'll supply Europe with the oil and gas. So that's not making Russia happy. So this kind of ties back into biblical war, right? I'm sure you probably even heard this one, like Ezekiel 38, 39, Russia kind of coming down into the Middle East and making war with Israel. A lot of Christians feel that way. But then also, that they have that Islamic alliance. Don't forget about Communist China. But the other point I wanted to make, and I'll hand it back to you, is this. As a result of all these sanctions, I saw an article, Russia's going to go to the digital ruble. Now, Communist China already has their digital yuan. Russia is going to be going to its digital ruble. I saw an article last week. EU is going to their digital coin in 2023. Australia is making a push for the digital. As a matter of fact, when I did a video on that yesterday, a TikTok video, I had a few people from Australia actually tell me, yeah, this is true, because they just recently removed 460 banks. So they got rid of 460 banks, so they're centralizing more, and they got rid of almost 4,000 ATM machines. So it's getting harder to utilize cash. So it's not just Sweden anymore, or like maybe India, when we're talking digital, going in the path of digital right now. But I'll throw it back to you, because I think it's another consideration, because my whole thesis is, after Russia attacks us per Catholic prophecy, guess what we're going to be talking about? We need to go digital. So I was joking around. I said, we'll have our Biden coin. Back to you, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, the fiat money only exists because you believe it has value. That's the only thing that keeps it floating, is your perception of value and everybody else's perception that it is strong enough that it has value. That's the only thing, really. You could wake up tomorrow and it's, how many times have we woken up in history, thousands plural, and people just don't believe in the paper money or whatever it is issued, and that's it. What I see coming with the food shortages, and I'm still going to stay, I've said how many times, I've talked to you for a year now, and I kept saying we're going to be coming to rationing in 2022 for the food. I'm even more convinced that wheat will be the first thing rationed across the planet, and for sure we are going to go to rationing. I just can't see how we cannot. The way it looks like it's so planned right now to cause the most chaos and breakdown of everything in a single excuse. And, with this grand solar minimum crop loss that I knew was coming, that would limit global production of food from this point forward all the way to 2028, where this was even Valentina Zarkova back before she was censored and forced to retract a lot of her publications. She was calling on governments, this is 2018, 2017, to start stockpiling food for the famine that would be here in 2028. So put that, again, there's a lot of these little dots of information that we're laying around and out that could point into, there was massive famine inbound from grand solar minimum losses anyway. And now it seems that governments are pushing on purpose different buttons to create the chaos preemptively, sort of along the same timelines, to then blame or excuse away the food challenges, the oil challenges, the whatever challenge it would be. It seems like there's ready-made excuses for it already. It continued to amplify. So if you look at the central planners, Russia and Kazakhstan would not nearly have the effect that this is having with the Ukraine, because Kazakhstan is a swing producer that also, I think that they produce around 10 million tons of wheat, but most of that's earmarked for China. So if you were going to do the same thing, you got to realize those two are bread baskets. Ukraine and Kazakhstan are two Wild West bread baskets, along with Myanmar. And it's really quirky that all of these have been in the news and all have had coups and all of political turmoil of all these three breadbasket nations that could increase production within the last 2 years. Again, the possibilities of all these, what are considered, could expand breadbaskets. I just think it's a little quirky on how it's all happening there. But you couldn't get the same political, economic, and commodities chaos if you were going to do the same thing, playing Russia and Kazakhstan off. Wouldn't work. It's got to come in. It's got to be Ukraine and it's got to be Russia, because those two, like I say, 30% of all the grains. Now, here's the thing, though. That was the export totals of when there was good harvests and extra crops being grown. That 30% total was what Ukraine and Russia had exported to the world. Now, what we're seeing with the war here, their tilling should be going on right now. Because I look at the crop planting and harvest season, like you can go to the USDA and look up the calendars. It's called like a crop calendar. So it'll show you, what months generally they're tilling, what months generally they're planting, when it comes into the harvest season, and when it's in mid-grow or like plant maturation time. So when we look, there should be tilling in Ukraine going on now in the southern and central regions, 0. So when you're looking at that going, all right, well, they're not even going to grow their base needs for themselves this year. So they themselves will need emergency imports of something. So I just don't see how there'll be enough food around to go around the world. And by the way, corn is in everything. Everything has a corn byproduct in it.
What would you say you would be expecting? Let's kind of break it down by quarter, by spring. Is there anything sort of on your radar that most people who are in this space are perhaps missing? Some tidbits that we could kind of look for. Like if A happens, then B is about to happen, type of thing. I know you kind of alerted us to that Amazon situation in regards to their shipping policies or whatever. That it could be go time when. Explain that again. Just kind of rehash that sort of warning, but. We're all ears. We're trying to all figure this out together, Dave, in regards to what we need to be doing, individually, as a family, as community, so we could be as prepared as possible. And I don't think, and maybe you agree with me or maybe you don't, but I don't think any of us are going to be fully prepared. There's just so many variables, you know what I mean? Between weather, between economics, laws. I mean, it's a lot.
I talked to a few people around my circle because the information I have, others want to talk about it too. So I have conversations with interesting people that are much higher up than myself. I mean, so far up that, they're up in the stratosphere business-wise above. So one of the conversations a while back was that when Amazon starts charging for all deliveries, that is one of the key indicators that it's about to collapse. Because at the point of something, and it fits right in with what we're seeing now, is fuel's going to get so expensive and so unattainable for most that the drivers or even deliveries are going to have to be reworked and retooled. They're going to get so costly. So when Amazon does say there's no more free shipping, you're going to have to pay for everything because we just can't afford the fuel costs, and this free shipping model doesn't work anymore inside our own whatever algorithm they use to determine, how they're going to break even on the cost or return policies, that sort of thing. That was an indicator. And also I had a real good conversation a couple days ago with some high-level grain traders, and they were getting emails telling them to buy at any price and do not play game of chicken, any offer, take it at any price to get in your hand because it's going to become unavailable. Now, these when I say these are some of the largest traders in America, I really mean that. They go by rail like millions of tons a year. And their group was told, get it at any price. And when farmers are going to be growing for them in the season, there's going to be changes because of fertilizer shortages, of input costs and fuel costs to run on the fields. And again, they were told, don't play Russian roulette. You pay the farmer anything they want. If there's price increases as they move through the growth season, you pay it. You do not ask, you get it. You pay anything that's asked, because for them, getting the supply to continue with their operations of having the grain gives them the up, because then they can produce the protein to have a market to sell something that's going to be so vastly more expensive and valuable than it is today. But they need the input to have that last commodity coming out of it. Protein is going to become valuable. I'll leave it there. But the grain traders now are getting at any cost, and now we're getting into this country war bidding where they're like, I don't care if I'm paying 6 cents a bushel over, 10 cents, 15 cents a bushel over. Don't care. If you're going to run it by the ton, I don't care if it costs me an extra $50 or $100. I'll take it. Get it to me. That's where we're today. But when it's not going to be grown, see, this is the indicator. When you can't literally provide it at any cost, this is when we're going to see some significant problems. I just really think that there's no way. Currently, the way that it's been set up seems like it's so planned that I don't know if there's a way out of round one here, except grow your own food and get your communities up. And I really don't have much advice on that, except you need to get prepared in the best way you can. And everything needs to be in go mode right now. Burning and trying to get hay bales up here so we can do hay bale gardening, and trying to get my guy with a skid steer over here with a bucket so we can quickly knock out a bunch of stuff off a field and plant right through here immediately this weekend. might get whacked by the cold again, but it's better to have it in the ground, and possibly maybe we can cover it with plastic during mid-grow but we need to get it up and running immediately.
Right. Yeah, no, all great points. I was making a few prepper points this morning. I actually jumped back into picking up some more of those canned meats. Remember I was telling you about Keystone? Because I created some more space down in the basement where I could, probably get another 200 to 300 cans, in all honesty. And so I went back, and since the last time I was there doing this, now keep in mind, this is only maybe like 3 or 4 months since the last time I bought a can. It's up well over $1, like $1.50. They jacked up the prices on that. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like in 3 to 6 months from now, when we know this is going to be like for analogy's sake, this is going to be like a snowball turning into a freaking avalanche here soon, right? I mean, we're just at the beginning stages. If you're not preparing now, I mean, that avalanche is going to hit you.
It'll be the largest avalanche coming off of Mount Everest sliding down into the valley. We're not talking your regular run-of-the-mill Mount Shasta tiny little avalanche, Mount Everest avalanche style, if you want to put it into perspective. I'm going to make a bold call here and say what we're about to experience is the largest change in the last 2,000 years.
Wow.
Going back to Roman era collapse period right now.
Unbelievable. It's coming, buddy. You've been calling it. We've been doing these shows for a while, like you said, and it's right there upon us.
Can I mention something about the Tonga eruption?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Paraguay had its yields reduced, and Argentina is going to have its yields reduced further because they were in mid-grow when this eruption took place. Now, the southern hemisphere is going to cool a little bit more, and they're going to have trouble with crop production moving forward because of the Tonga eruption. So then you can add in that third variable. But the reason I brought that up is with what we're talking about, the weather anomalies, that's all based on electromagnetic changes, magnetospheric changes on our planet, the north and south orientation of our poles, the way that things are locked in place because of strong magnetic fields is going out the window. We're coming into a very weak magnetic period here. So, you've heard me many a time say the same thing. We're going to start to see a lot more red sprites electrically active in the atmosphere, and they're going to stay with the discharge longer in the atmosphere. We're also going to see a lot more what you consider like canyon wall types of figures that'll appear over thunderstorms, the plasma discharge and the plasma glyphs. You'll start to see a lot of this. And lo and behold, NASA and NOAA just released an article about 3 days ago that said, because the Tonga eruption went up 180,000 feet into the atmosphere and touched the mesosphere, that there's a static electricity membrane up there that's going to create more red sprites, blue halos, and electrical discharge that'll stay for a longer period of time in the heavens. To look for it, so don't be freaked out when you see it. It's just from the ash from Tonga. It's not the sun stepping down causing electromagnetic changes across the solar system. It's just because of the volcanic eruption. But how many times have I talked about you're going to see strange things in the skies? And here we are now, NASA and NOAA saying, yeah, we are. For sure we are. You better get ready for it. We'll explain it to you.
Yeah, Scripture verifies that too as well. One of the earth changes that I saw, there was an article, and I was mentioning on my Solo Premium podcast last hour. I didn't find this article at tinfoilhat.com. I found it on the AP News. Fresh warnings of a New Madrid quake. And I know in years past they've been talking about potential mega quake, kind of going back into history and all that's involved there. Then I saw another report, fresh warnings for the West Coast again. That's a variable that you can't. I mean, how do you really honestly prepare for an earthquake? I mean, what do you do in a situation when you're getting prepared and something like that pops up? I don't know if you have any thoughts, because I don't know. Did we ever discuss New Madrid and potential quake? I don't recall us ever really breaking that down. What's your thoughts on that thesis?
Yeah, it would be expected that there would be a New Madrid fault let off here in another 8.0 or 8.8, whatever, 8.7 quake that would rock this place. All the bridges would go down. So, in perhaps you got to think, all right, what would be taken offline during the earthquake? So then you can work your way backwards into it. Well, the pipelines would be ruptured from underground, and that would be natural gas, water, oil, anything that's delivered by pipeline. But then you would have the conduits that deliver electric signal, like your fiber optic cables and electrical cables themselves that are underground would rip and fracture. So then your power might get cut off. The bridges would go down. So you would know that the deliveries coming from across there, be it road or rail, would all cease. And everything would kind of, okay, west would be west and east would be east across the Mississippi River. And then you just have to look at the damage totals from there and see what kind of infrastructure was taken out that would produce something. That's the only way you could possibly protect yourself from that is, working your way back. So my whole thing would be, okay, I have a canvas tent that sleeps 8. It's a yurt. And I also have a winter well stove, and that's glass on 3 sides. It's enough to heat and boil water and keep that tent at 60, 65 degrees Fahrenheit when it's 25 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And at the same time, we have a pond, and I have all the different filters. And then I even have filters, so if it's muddy, that you can run through and eliminate the mud before you put it into your actually the Berkey filter, for example. And distillation is still so we can create water. I know you can't drink it forever, distilled water, but something's better than nothing for the beginning.
Yeah, how long does distilled water last? That's a good question.
Well, you're not supposed to, you yourself as a human should not drink that for too long, because there's nothing in it. It would actually leach out some of the minerals that you need in your body. But
okay,
as a hydration thing for, up to a week or something, okay. But you wouldn't want to drink distilled water for months on end. That would be no good for your health. Seriously. Just try to live without electricity for a week and imagine how you would do things. Because if a major earthquake comes, you're going to be living without electricity for months, plural, on a New Madrid, because it would devastate so much stuff that it would be months, plural, if not a half a year or a year until things get back to normal. So trace the daisy chain back. How would you live without electricity? You got to meet your basic needs. Sewage. Well, I'm glad we have a septic tank out here. You can poo all day long and nothing will happen out here. But then again, that would keep our water source clean. So where's your water source coming from? And do you know it's clean enough to drink? Because, somebody was talking about Chernobyl, and we're all right. Well, I remember you remember the mercury in the fish in Lake Erie kind of thing? Do you know how safe your water source is and your protein source if you're going to get catfish or perch or bluegill or whatever out of your pond? Are there going to be any metals in it? Is water contaminated where the fish is from?
Or any of the psychotropic drugs? They're finding like psychotropic drugs in rivers and and water supplies. So we are expecting a blackout. There's been a lot of inside whistleblowers saying that there is a blackout coming. It could be anywhere from a couple days to a couple months. There was one Catholic theology professor, history professor out in Spain who gave a talk back in late 2021 saying he had high Russian and American intel on what was going to happen basically the next 6 months. And this was the first thing that he mentioned, and some of which he talked about has already happened. He said it would go on for months. So you were just mentioning, like, okay, what if the power went down even for like a weekend? How many Americans would probably jump off a bridge if they didn't have their phones or computers for a weekend, let alone 2 months? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but my point is it ties into the dark winter exercise where they do want to take down our power grid supply for sure. And this is why they've been doing events like Operation Dark Sky a couple years ago up in Wisconsin. They are preparing for it.